I feel like I am a student of life these days, just ever with curiosity and lots of questions. But I feel lucky that I get to sit in this role as moderator to pick the brains of these experts, if you will, on the conversations around inclusion and diversity. And Maria and I actually had crossed paths and had a conversation around this topic. And so we decided, wait, we just need to make this an entire breakout session. This is something I've been talking to Nathan about around looking at kind of the main stage for a conversation around inclusion and diversity. All the conversations we had last year really have led us to have an understanding of these changes within organizations have to start from the top down. They have to be blessed and bought in by leadership in order for inclusion to even be a reality. The dream or the intention is one thing, but the reality of that, I think, is still something we're all hoping for. And secondarily, the ability for each of us within the sphere of influence that we have to be self-aware to recognize our own biases, conscious or otherwise, I think is how we all then can lean into actually helping to be co-creators of an inclusive culture within construction. So just to kick us off, kind of focusing this conversation today really around building a foundation specifically for inclusion, we're going to ask ourselves these questions in the conversation with Maria today. First, how might we help construction leaders recognize the need for inclusion? I think this is something that in the journey we've had this last year and the conversations we've had and the listening that we've been doing, it's evident that if leadership is deaf to this conversation, then it's a huge uphill battle. So how do we help construction leaders recognize the need for inclusion? And really, how do we help them recognize this in ways that really leverage cognitive diversity? I don't know if you all have heard this term of cognitive diversity, but Maria talks about this, and Nathan and I actually on our Shared Pains podcast, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, actually talked about cognitive diversity as kind of the goal for diversity. So hearing Maria speak to how she actually has a program really geared around making leaders aware of cognitive diversity as really how she builds the foundation for discussions around diversity. And how do we do this in ways so that all employees are really encouraged to call up workplace discrimination? So part of my role at Procore as Director of Industry Advancement is having conversations with the women in construction community, including inclusion and diversity. And the top 3 things we're asked to have conversations around, number 1 is how do I address the bias face to face when I experience it? So from the individual's level, how do I call this out? Well, we asked this question of Maria in this session saying, hey, we really want to dive into this, get a little more into blocking and tackling. And she said, I have a term that I use, calling up. And she had a story around that we'll share here as well. So we're going to learn today really about how each of us can then call up workplace discrimination as we see it and start to create the dialogue, hopefully to address this within the workplace. So what I'd like to do is before I jump into introducing Maria, this is a great group that we have here. And obviously people are going to be able to watch this on YouTube after, but I do want to give a chance for each of you to just quickly introduce yourself. And if you want to give us just your name, the company you work for, or you can even give us the title or your position with that company. But I'm looking for what part of this conversation are you leaning into today? And really, what are you hoping to get out of the conversation? So I will go ahead and call on each of you. I don't want to have to, and I believe that's how Nathan, well, let me look at this list because there's actually quite a few. So let me make sure I call on the ones that Nathan had mentioned. So I'm going to start with the first 5 that I see. So Chad, you're on my list. You're hello, friend. Introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Oh man, first one out of the gate. Amazing. Chad Pearson, Director of Business Development at Plexxis Software. And yeah, I've been with CPC for quite a while now. I participate in these discussions all the time, especially on the mental health, because at our company, I teach a course on performance during chaos and critical stress. It's a course that is designed primarily around police, military, and combat psychology tactics, but it has been adjusted to a corporate world to really foster high performance while maintaining a strong mental health for yourself and helping those around you maintain a strong mental health while performing under chaos and critical stress. So I'm always excited to be a part of these conversations to keep my mind open as to what other people are doing.
Excellent, Chad. Thank you so much for joining in. Please don't hesitate with the wealth of knowledge that you have as well from participating today. I'm going to go next to Rachael Ferrera, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, my name is Rachael Ferrera. I work with Zachry Corporation in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm a system admin for our document control system. And why I wanted to participate in this conversation is we have actually started a D&I initiative at Zachry. And so just providing myself with more knowledge and more information so I can be more of an asset to my company to help with that initiative.
Yes, awesome. We come to the right place today. We will have links that we can send posts. So feel free to take notes, but also feel free to kind of just let it all sink in and absorb it as well. Khalid, David, I'll go to you next. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Khalid David, founder and CEO of TracFlo. We're a software company. I work for construction companies. I come from a background in the industry, grew up with a family of union carpenters, worked for subcontractors. I worked for Turner in the past, and now I'm bringing tech to the industry. I'm here to add my perspective, to share my voice, and to be a part of the conversation.
Yes, welcome. Thank you so much. And again, please lean into the conversation. It's 70 minutes, and we're going to kind of start off with a fireside chat with Maria first, but don't hesitate to chat to each other, to me, to Maria. We'll do our best to get to everyone, so don't hesitate. Thank you, Khalid. Welcome. Nick Tilford, welcome today. Would you mind introducing yourself to the group?
Absolutely. My name is Nick Tilford. I am a BIN BDC manager, currently based out of San Antonio, Texas with Yates Construction.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So if I didn't call on you, it doesn't mean we don't want you to participate. It just, we wanted to kind of get a sense for those who are in the room. Please don't hesitate to chat or speak up or raise your hand virtually or otherwise. So to get us started today, I want to give you a little bit of an intro into our subject matter expert, Maria Guy. It's truly my pleasure to be able to introduce her to you. Maria and I met, I think it's maybe 2 months ago now.
Yes, I think.
And since have done a couple things together, because the first time I met her and understood what she does and the leadership development that she does, I was immediately intrigued and said, how much can we work together to help the industry and the conversations really around the topic of changing the culture of construction and helping leaders to look differently at their people as more of an asset to be invested in. And so just to give you a little bit of background of Maria's experience that she's bringing to this table, she has over 20 years of experience in the construction industry, primarily serving as vice president for a general as well as a mechanical contractor in New Mexico. She took that accumulation of experience and became the senior partner at Giant, which if you're not familiar, you're definitely going to want to look them up today. They do, it's an organization dedicated to really truly unlocking the potential of people through leadership. They also focus on development, consulting, and training. Their videos are amazing. We use them at Procore. I've referred them to friends who are principals of schools because it translates so well just in leadership in general. And in her role as senior partner, she works primarily with companies in the AEC architecture engineering space. She holds a BS in construction engineering from the University of New Mexico, as well as an MS in civil engineering from the University of Colorado at Boulder. She has served on the board of the Civil Engineering Department at the University of New Mexico, as well as on the board for AGC of New Mexico. And in fact, in 2008, she became AGC of New Mexico's first and sadly so far only female president since its inception in 1948. And in 2012, Maria was awarded the Skill, Integrity, and Responsibility Award from AGC of New Mexico. This award, if you're not familiar, it's presented to individuals who have really dedicated their lives to construction and who have been very instrumental in groundbreaking advancements for our industry. So by that description, you already can tell that Maria is well experienced to be a subject matter on this topic. So Maria, thank you for joining us.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Very, very glad to have you. So to start our conversation today, I really want to kind of dive into a little purview, give us a purview into the conversations you're having in the C-suite. 2012 has been quite the year. 2020 has been quite the year. 2012 was awesome. I mean, 2020 has been quite the year. So as we kind of look at 2021 and where we're coming in 2021, the work that you've been doing has obviously been going on for multiple years. But as you're having these conversations in the C-suite, I want to get a sense for what are you seeing? Is there diversity in the C-suite? Who is the audience you're primarily engaging with as you're consulting?
There is so much that went on in 2020. I think like everyone else, the construction industry was waiting to see what was going to happen. We were hoping it'll all blow over by April and we can all get back to work. And then it just turned into, we're months and months in. And what I realized with my business, because consulting, it's the first thing to go in a crisis. We don't have time for learning. We just got to survive. And the opposite happened. The business did not stop. The business began to increase. And two reasons, I believe. One is because construction, architecture, engineering, we were essential businesses. We were essential to what was happening. And my clients saw a greater need to double down and get some support for their employees to figure out how do we navigate all of this. So my engagements did not decrease. The public speaking did, but the engagements with clients continued to increase. And so this idea of really investing in employees became really important to a lot of people. But the conversations that we've been having have been different because I've had clients that I've had for 3, 4, 5 years, but the conversation shifted because of the stress and everything that people were going through. So as we look at the makeup in the C-suite, I think I maybe see 1 female to, 4 men, 1 in 5 will be, in the C-suite. There's still not that diversity. I think overall in construction, we're seeing maybe 10% of folks in construction are women. So we're seeing not quite that diversity yet that we'd like to see at least in between men and women. And just it's a conversation that we are continuing to have. But as you and I talked, Sasha, we start at the place of first understanding ourselves and developing self-awareness. So that's always where I start, regardless of the makeup of the team, to help them understand where are we first before we start wanting to change things. And construction is just the type of industry where change is hard. We've been doing a lot of the same things for hundreds of years. And so sometimes change is hard, but I think we are in a unique position because of what happened in 2020 to pivot and to begin to have different kinds of conversations because we were forced to deal with challenge, uncertainty, newness of things in a different way. And so I think it's the right time to begin to start having and building on the conversations that need to be had for our industry.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on also relates to, conversations that actually Nathan and I have had over the years, which is if we're seeing the C-suite doesn't have a lot of diversity to begin with. And we know that this industry by nature is more resistant to change. And that's for good reason, with a lot of the risk that's being carried in projects. But at what risk do we have going down the road of Kodak or Blockbuster if I don't even know if it's by design, but where we've landed is somewhat of the C-suite with echo chambers, where the highest place for decision making to be happening, if we have an echo chamber effect, there is a real concern that we may potentially already be at risk for what we saw in some of these other industries. And so what I'd love to understand from your perspective is, with the understanding that you're approaching, regardless of the individual that you're interacting with from a leadership consulting standpoint, how do you begin to broach that conversation around diversity? Because Maria, when you and I first met, I remember I just point blank asked the question, how are you having conversations with leaders around diversity? And you were like, well, I actually have to step back first before I even bring that up. So how are you having conversations with leaders around this topic or idea of diversity?
Yes, we have to take a step back because that conversation needs a foundation. And so where we start is by having people understand themselves first. This idea of cognitive diversity is really understanding the differences in perspectives and information processing styles, if you will. We all come with, we're hardwired in different ways. We get our energy from different perspectives. We process information differently. We make decisions differently. Some of us are organized. Some of us are more spontaneous and flexible. We need to begin to understand that first. And most of the people I work with think they're more self-aware than they actually are. And so we have to start there, where we help them understand both internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. And that internal self-awareness is where you understand yourself, your passions, your feelings, your thoughts, how you make decisions, and how they impact others. But that's just part of it. External self-awareness is, how do other people see me? Because they probably don't see me the way I see myself. And when very few people can develop both of those without intention. It takes intentionality to really become a student of yourself and say, wait a minute, what kind of impact am I having? One question I like to ask my leaders is, what's it like to be on the other side of you? What's it like to work for you? What's it like to live with you? What's it like to have you as a boss? Whether we realize it or not, people are having an experience on the other side of us. Is that difficult? Is that inspiring? Is it hard? Is it all of those things in the same day, depending on who you're talking to? So when we start there, understanding our cognitive diversity, understanding that we need a lot of different perspectives, because when it comes to being in new, uncertain, or complex situations, we need that diversity. That diversity helps us solve problems and get through things in a different way. If we have people all thinking the same way, we can't solve those problems as well as when we have different perspectives. So when people begin to understand, the tool that we use is the 5 voices. So the 5 voices: nurture, creative, guardian, connector, and pioneer. They're all very different, but we need all of them. There's not a one that's better than the other. There's not a one that you can do without. And so when people begin to understand that, and you understand the human need that everyone needs to be heard, valued, and appreciated, you start seeing your team in a different way. So we begin to flex some of that thinking, where helping people understand. So we are not dismissing people from leadership positions because we think we have this vision of what a leader should look like, and we're trying to only let those folks lead. Every one of the voices, every one of these perspectives can lead, but they need to understand themselves first so that they lead in their own voice and not try and be someone that they're not, because that is exhausting and frustrating, and it's not successful. So this cognitive diversity is not visible. You can't see it, right? Like you can age, gender, or race. And so it takes digging in and really becoming a student of yourself and understanding, how am I wired? What am I bringing to the table? And what is my team missing? What else do we need? And so I think 2020, this whole situation that we're in, it's never been more important to understand the makeup of your team, because we've been stressed in ways that are very new. And what I noticed in all my clients, we identify stress as healthy stress, moderate stress, and extreme stress. And we want you to recognize where you are so you can get yourself back to healthy stress. But what I noticed with the pandemic with most of my clients, they moved to moderate and sometimes extreme, and then back to moderate. No one has gone back to healthy, or very few people have gone back. So we're living with this constant, steady state of stress. And if I don't understand myself and what I need to do to relieve some of that stress, to be able to stay healthy, it's having an impact on everyone. It's having an impact on your family, on your team, on your organization. And if we don't understand that, we can't have this different diversity and inclusion conversation until we develop an understanding of that piece first. So I think that's critical that we begin there before we can start bringing more topics, because at that point, we're confused. We just don't even know how to process and take in and compartmentalize and organize all of this. So it's complicated, and yet it's not. Because if we can start with the foundation, then we can begin to have other conversations on top of that.
That was one of the things that came up when you and I were talking, was relating it to construction, that, you know, if you're going to have a large high-rise building, we all know how much time is spent below subterranean to build out a foundation in order for you to have that much elevation above ground. In the world, of course, why does it take so long to build a road, or why does it take so long to build a skyscraper? Because the subterranean work is non-visible, if you will, to the layman. And I think you were relating it to similarly for leadership development as well, is there is a substrate that has to be, a foundation that has to be laid in order for these other precepts and concepts to be built on top of it, to where, and you and I talked about this, and I'd love to kind of look at how cognitive diversity helps avoid this. But even in these conversations, we've had people talk about, are we talking about ticking boxes? Is that what we're talking about? Is that the execution of diversity? Or are we really talking about inclusion as that end goal? So I'd be curious to know how that foundation, you know, rebar and concrete, and how we test strength, et cetera, when we think about construction, but looking at the ingredients for cognitive diversity and how you leverage that in your conversations. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about, how does cognitive diversity build that foundation?
We start there for sure. And like I said, we use the tool of the 5 voices to help people understand there's voices that are very relational. Some people are very process related. Some people love a challenge and love to do hard and difficult things and push envelopes. Some people are big picture. Some people are very present oriented. So when you begin to understand all of those pieces, people begin, I've seen people just have a sigh of relief saying, it's okay for me to be this way. Yes, it is, because that's how you're wired. And so that we begin the process of developing that and knowing ourselves. But once you know yourself, you have to take that knowledge and lead yourself differently. So one of our tools, we use a lot of visual tools, know yourself to lead yourself. So as you begin to understand why you process the way you do, why you make decisions, you know, where does your energy come from? Well, then what does that mean? That means I need to understand the patterns of behavior that I've created over my life and the consequences of those actions that I take. Are they positive consequences? Are they negative consequences? And how are they shaping your reality? Is it a healthy reality, or is it strained and difficult? So now you're armed with this knowledge, you can go back and say, okay, where do I need to start doing things differently? Where do I need to take a different action so I can get different consequences in order to make it healthier for my team, in order to impact the culture of my organization and my family in a healthy way? So now we're moving in a positive direction with information. And then we move to this next step where we give people a definition of what leadership should look like, what strong, healthy leadership looks like. And that is what we define as liberating leadership, a liberator. So a liberator fights for the highest possible good in the lives of those they lead and work with. So if you are fighting for the highest possible good of the organization, of your team, of your child, of a family member, it filters out a lot of nonsense. It filters out your own agenda. It filters out what's convenient for you, and it forces you to look at the other person. And it roots out some of these biases that we have, right? If I'm fighting for the highest possible good of the organization, then I'm going to find the best candidate. And so if I'm fighting for the highest possible good of an individual, an employee, then I'm going to see where can they bring the biggest benefit, where can they grow, what's their next area. And I'm not seeing them as, or dismissing them because of their age. They're too young. They can't lead. Who says they can't? No, she's a woman. No, I don't know if she can lead a team of men. That might be, so I'll dismiss. So it begins to root out. Instead, it says, how can I calibrate high support and high challenge for everyone that I'm leading, for everyone that I'm working? That means I'm having the conversations that need to be had. Sometimes they can be, hey, I think you can do more, or this isn't right. You need to work on this. But I also bring support, which means encouragement. That means I'm noticing if you're off. Hey, what's going on? Are you okay? But I'm also bringing that support in a sense of I'm giving you time. I'm giving you the resources that you need. I'm giving you the training that you need. So when you calibrate high support and high challenge for people, and the reason leadership is hard is because you have to know, you can't paint everyone with the same brush. You have to look at the individual and say, what do you need from me right now? Now, I am being a liberator, and you don't have to have a staff or team to be a leader. We have to stop seeing ourselves as, well, I'm just an employee. I'm just an individual contributor. No, at a minimum, you are leading yourself. So you have to start seeing yourself as, I am responsible for creating the culture, and inside my family, inside my team, I'm impacting people around me. And when you start seeing yourself as a leader, you start taking on that responsibility of leadership. So, okay, great, Maria. What do I do with this responsibility? Well, I need a definition. I need something to aspire to. I need to start thinking myself as, how do I fight for the highest possible good in the lives of those we lead? When an organization, starting with the C-suite, catches that vision and says, this is how we're going to lead and live, it changes everything. Because that definition of leadership starts seeing people for who they are. And we lose, it exposes some of those biases that we often have. And it all comes because now I understand myself. Now I understand this other person. And I also have a definition of what leadership should look like. And it clears out a lot of the noise. One of my clients calls it's noise. If we can turn down the noise, we will make the decisions where people will thrive in our environment. People will be wanting to work for us. And when I think about the industry as a whole, we've always struggled. I mean, when I was an executive, I'd go to conferences and we're struggling with the same thing: talent, retention, attraction. Well, if you want to attract someone, you have to be attractive, right? You have to provide the kind of environment and leadership and opportunities that inspire people to come and join us. And so that's my goal. That's what my passion is. How do we shift the way we see ourselves and see our industry so that we have people lining up to say, I want to be a part of what these folks are doing because they care about all of me and they want to see all of me grow and thrive. But it begins, I always start with the C-suite. When I engage with the new client, I say, I need to start with the leaders first. I need to help them understand themselves. And then we can start impacting the culture throughout, all the way to the individual contributor inside the organization.
And it was interesting as you say that, because I'm thinking about multiple conversations had this past year with leaders around the idea of inclusion and diversity. And there's been so much will, I think for the first time, we've had really open conversations with leaders around what is it like to be a Black person in construction, whether it's the field, the trailer, the office, or leadership. And even here in this forum, we've had so many conversations with those who are from the LGBTQ community, those who are our African-American colleagues, people of color, women of color. And a lot of what's come out of those listening sessions is, A, I don't see myself really represented there. B, the path to promotion, I don't do the things that I'm supposed to be doing to get there. I don't play golf. I don't hunt. So we have these conversations around creating this awareness for leaders so that they can have the foundation of understanding I have a bias and it doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me normal.
Yes.
Like number one, I have bias and that makes me normal because that's how the brain works. Number two, we do not want to create an environment where we're ticking boxes of numbers. But we have to be intentional. In construction, what you measure is what matters to you. So we do want to look at what is the intention of creating diversity and being able to measure, are we making progress or are we languishing? Women in construction, for instance, currently it's around 9% of the total population of construction are women, but it's been that for 25 years. That number has stayed. So we may say, well, 9% of women are in construction. Okay, that's a start. No, I'm sorry, it's not. Women of color, 0.2% currently in the construction. There's so much opportunity for us to acquire talent, to bring them on board and to retain them. So what I want to kind of pivot and dive into now is this question that gets asked of me as a moderator to ask a lot. And I think this is really, Maria, I want to get your take on this because I see your experience from the leadership, then into the blocking and tackling of actually how do you realize the intention of leadership? How would you instruct an individual to address bias as they experience it? And this is whether we're talking about the job site, the project team, your leadership team or office. I, as a woman in construction, experienced it and had my own ways of dealing with it. But I'm curious to get you to kind of talk us through this idea of addressing bias in the moment. How do we empower individuals to speak to it or to address it as you're working at the top to create self-awareness and cognitive diversity? What are your methodologies around addressing bias in the moment?
I think you have to be brutally honest with yourself first. You have to ask, what is my intention? What are my motives here? Because whether you realize it or not, people are asking themselves 3 questions when they're on the other side of you. They are asking, is Sasha for me? Is she against me? Or is she for herself? If she's for me, I'm going to receive that whatever she has to say, even though it might be hard to hear. If she's against me, I don't want to hear anything she has to say. I have to protect myself from her. But if she is for herself, then it's going to feel self-serving. So I have to ask myself of myself. Do people experience me as for them, against them, or for myself? Most people are not against other people. They don't go out of their way. They don't wake up thinking, how can I destroy someone's life today? They don't operate in that way. But a lot of people are for themselves. And so when you have that kind of attitude with someone, first of all, it's very hard to disguise. So you might say the right things, but they're going to land in the wrong way because that person is experiencing you as you have an agenda. You have a plan, and I'm a pawn on your chessboard, right? And so I feel used. I don't feel like we are truly collaborating. And so when you begin to ask yourself these questions, I often tell my clients, do not have that conversation until you can get into the mind frame that I am fighting for their highest good. I am for them. And that's why we're going to have this conversation. And it begins to expose some of those things. Gosh, I'm actually, I'm just inconvenienced. I just want it done because I want it done. I don't care what it causes them. I don't care what it takes for them to do that. I have my own motive, my own agenda. And so it begins with us, because you can have a conversation about very difficult things if you can process through, how do I deliver this so that it lands in the right way? But if you are not able to ask yourself those questions and be honest with yourself, you're going to have a hard time really engaging with your team and dealing with the issues that need to be dealt with inside the organization or with another employee. So it begins with looking at ourselves, Sasha, first.
So, and I always say this, I don't know if you've all read the book Blank, a wonderful, wonderful book, which talks about the brain's capacity to take in thousands of inputs and stimulus to make a split-second decision. And I think this is kind of the way our minds work in order to, like a computer, in order to process things effectively and efficiently. We've come up with all these shortcuts, which are our biases, which allow us to come to decisions and determine fight or flight, etc. And having spent time in the field, there is an addiction to that adrenaline that is rushing through your veins at every moment of the project. And it has always been he or she who yells the loudest typically wins. Whereas technology is now starting to come in and disrupt that. We now have data that informs us to give us a neutral place to actually have a conversation and analyze, versus knee gut reaction. I haven't eaten breakfast. I haven't had lunch. I had my butt chewed out earlier. You're now bringing a problem to me. I am going to unload on you, and you're going to take the brunt of it. And I'm going to win this battle because I'm hungry. Like, that's where we have been, where technology is tipping the scales and disrupting is, well, now, no, actually we can have neutral space to have a conversation, to analyze, and all of that baggage you were bringing from wherever you were going into this conversation, now you may not win, because intuitively humans have the ability to read other humans. Typically, I will say this, I've learned this in relationships. I thought I was such a good mind reader. I suck at it. I suck at underthinking what my partner's thinking. So I've just come to tell myself, like, you suck at that, Sasha. Don't try.
Oh my God.
Ask questions. Ask questions. So this idea of asking the questions of yourself first, I think, is powerful. Then the other side of that, what if you're dealing with a leader who just does not see the value in a conversation around inclusivity? This calling up idea. What is that, and how do we do it?
There's a difference between calling up and calling out. When you call someone up, you remind them of what they're capable of. You provide something that they can aspire to. When you call someone out, you just, you show them what's wrong with them, and they become angry, defensive, and feel ashamed. No one ever inspired anyone by calling them out. So we call people up to remind them of, look, as an industry, we need to call ourselves up. We need to be up here because we are essential. We are necessary. We are amazing. We do things that no one else can do. Let's operate up here. Why don't we start seeing ourselves as up here, right? So I'm calling the construction industry up to a different standard of leadership, to a different way of seeing each other, instead of, calling someone out. To call someone out, unfortunately, our society has come to the place where there's no safe place for someone to be redirected. Society wants to cancel people. We want to call for the resignation. And there's no place to redirect and say, we're not doing this well. We have not handled this well. how can we begin to take a look at this differently? Because there is an economic impact. And sometimes that's what's going to convince someone to start having this conversation, right? We are losing talent, we are losing money, we are losing, people, if we do not begin to take a look at what does it feel like to work here? What does it feel like to work under some of our leaders? And I have to tell you that right now I probably have about 120 people that I coach, in groups, different folks. And over the last few years, I've probably had 1,000 people that I've worked with. 2 decided that it was not worth it. It's too hard. It's just too hard. So, if we say 99% of the people in the industry are saying, if we knew a better way, we'd do it. Just show us a better way. But it needs to make economic sense. It needs to make, relational sense. It needs to make business sense. And there's a business case for all of this. We are better companies and we're more profitable companies when we invest in the culture of our organizations. So sometimes that may be the route that you need to take with someone who doesn't think that it's important for people to feel great because it's construction, you're getting a paycheck, it's not, figure it out. I had to, if things have changed, people either want to be, in the workplace or they don't, and they'll go find somewhere else. So let's attract people. We're calling this industry up to do something different, to change the way they see themselves and the way we are leading people, because it's going to begin to attract people. But there's an economic impact, definitely, but also a cultural impact. And that's what people are looking for now, is a place where there's flexibility, but I get paid well, but they're also investing in me and I like being there. And the people, that I'm working with, I enjoy. That may feel like a tall bill. Hey, how about 3 out of 5, Maria? Well, there are companies that are, meeting just, some of those, but they're not the ones that are growing. They're not the ones that are moving. So, to my example, those 2 leaders that just said, this is too much work. I can still, get things done, but they never have the influence that they think their title entitles them to. I'm the VP. What don't you get? Why don't people listen to me? Why aren't people, want to work for me? Why is there a turnstile here in this certain position? Because as soon as they get to work with me, they leave. That's what happens when you decide not to work on yourself. But I would say 99% of the people that I'm working with say, where was this? I needed these tools. I needed this language to begin to understand what was happening. I didn't even know what was happening. I was doing the best I knew how, but now it's exposed as that's not sustainable. That's not healthy. That's not the best way to lead. And you begin to give them this definition of what a liberating leader is, and you give them knowledge about themselves. Well, now they can move forward intelligently, intentionally, making some changes versus crossing your fingers and hope we hire the right people, hope the good ones don't leave, hope, and hope is not a strategy. And so until we become educated in this way, we started with this idea of cognitive diversity, we really don't know what next step to take. And so that needs to change.
You talked about creating a safe place to redirect people's behavior. And this was something that I was on my own journey learning last year. Based on my personality style, I'm more of, let's lead this horse to water. Let's lead people to this place. But to be frank, last year, I had no patience and no tolerance anymore. I'm sorry. I've had conversations for a decade around technology and how technology infinitely improves the lives of the people doing the work if you first align the right people in the right role to the right process and then define the technology. That 3-legged stool is so important. After last year, I was like, if you don't get it, you don't get it. Fine, moving on. I do not have time to sit here and be an evangelist in the wilderness telling you why your business could be better, why your people could be better. It came up in the conversations around bias and diversity as well. if you're at a company, and especially for somebody who's a minority, you're the least person who the burden sits on the shoulders of, to be like, this company really needs to think about having a more diverse C-suite here. Let me think about how I get myself there. But we come from construction, which is very much of a mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be self-actualized, do the work. Like, that's very much a mentality. So I'm curious for you in that conversation around creating a safe space. I wonder if you'd share the story that you shared with me earlier about your own experience in talking, having a conversation with an older gentleman who gave you what he intended to be a compliment. But most of us women who are on this call we can say now, it's cringing. It's cringing. Yes. It's not a compliment. Could you tell us a little bit about that story and how you kind of relate that to creating a safe space to redirect?
Yes. I mean, chances are you're going to run into a situation where you think, oh my gosh, did he just say that? Or did she just, do that? And again, you can take one of two ways. You can, chastise, call HR, blow the whistle, or you can have a conversation and call that person up. So I was talking to this individual and known him for years. And so his comment is like, Maria, why is it that women from Texas are so beautiful? You and so, and he started naming other people. And I just thought, you can't say that. You can't, we can't, you can't tell someone, that this is, did he mean anything bad by it? No. Right. But what do you do in a situation like that? Well, first of all, you're embarrassed. I don't know if they're embarrassed, obviously not, because they said it, right? But you can have that conversation. It's like, you realize that that's not going to go over really well if you say something like that. You can't say that because someone may take offense to it, or someone might say, so what does that mean? I have value now because, I look good, or, it's just, some people are not going to take that well. So can we be that safe place that says, we need to pause here, right? This is not something that we should be saying inside of the office because someone is going to take offense. And then that person can say, so we could call them up, right? We call them up to, you may think that, but that's one of those things that needs to stay inside your head, that does not need to come out. So I'm calling you up to a different standard, right? Instead of calling you out and, talking to his boss and say, I'm never going to talk to that person again. And are we willing to do that? And it's hard depending on, this was fairly innocuous, right? If anything, it's a compliment in his eyes. And there might be something more serious, but can we have the conversation? Can you be a liberator for this person? Can you bring challenge to that person and say, I care about you too much to let this one go, to get away from us. This is not something that needs to happen. But I'm here for you. I'm not going to, report you or anything like that, but this is me being a liberator for you. I'm bringing challenge and I'm bringing support. And that's, I want you to not make the same mistake with someone else. So that person can redirect and say, oh, I didn't even realize what, I just didn't know. That's okay. That's okay. But if we are quick to cancel and dismiss and ruin someone who has made a contribution to the industry that just wasn't aware. And sometimes we have conversations, if we can be that friend to them that can say, the way you said that, it felt like you totally dismissed this, group of people. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize. Thank you for saying something, right? Thank you for saying something because I didn't realize I made people feel that way. Anytime someone's called me up because of, something that I said or thought, that was never my intention. It usually isn't. It's never any, people's intention to do harm. But if we can't be that safe place to redirect, then we just introduce fear. And fear is not great ground for things to thrive. And so there's a lot we can do inside our own organization to encourage that place where we can have those conversations And if we've made a mistake, to have people that will redirect us so that we learn how to do it differently. And we have an industry that it has a lot of ingrained patterns of the way that used to be, you know, things have changed the way I used to lead. Yeah, they have.
Yeah. And I think we used to look at like a generation, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, a generation thinks like, no, technology, the increments of innovation, the leaps between the increments of innovation and technology should be a clue to us because of how much technology interacts with our daily lives, should be a clue to us that a generation is no longer a 30-year stint or even 10 years, a decade. You need your software on your phone updates how many times because there's improvements, there's changes, there's new networks. Now consider that on the human level. How frequently have you upgraded the way you view the world, the way you see something as what is right? When was the last time you challenged your own perspective of your assumptions of something you think you're 100% sure of? So with that piece of it, I really want to pivot now because I do not have the best questions here. I just had the monopoly of Maria's time. So Maria, thank you so much for answering my questions and for taking on this journey. But now I'm going to turn it over to those of you who are sitting in. I would love to give you the opportunity. We have around 15 minutes. I really want to give the opportunity for this dialogue to happen. So I want to open it up to the audience who has questions for Maria. still in our fireside chat seat, but I don't have the best questions. So I want to leave it to you all to ask the questions that are on your mind. So I'll kind of create a space to let you come off mute.
And I have to say that our friend LV says the genius is in the room. I mean, yes. I know that the people here have answers as well. So I encourage, you know, whether it's Chad or Khalid who are experienced, you know, I heard in your introductions, I thought I want to hear what these guys have to say. So it's a conversation. So please.
Well, I got to tell you, it's I really liked what you said with fight for the highest possible good. The reason why, because what we do here internally, there's a dark side to diversity and inclusion, and that's when companies turn into the checkbox, yes. List, right? And sometimes, when you said how leaders have to look at themselves, that's actually where this started. Build Truth. Build Truth is really about yourself and actually being honest with yourself. And we strive internally to be true to ourselves as leaders here at our company. And when you said that, fight for the highest possible good, that statement kind of combines, there are two aspects that we look at leadership in terms of, and that's we have a serve and protect mentality. What I mean by that is, as leaders, we serve our team by providing everything that they need to succeed, but we also have the protection side where we are protecting the team from harmful behaviors. So in order to do that effectively as leaders, there's two things that we look at as a minimum requirement for leaders. One is that they become experts in human behavior. Subject matter experts as best they can. So you have to have a certain level of experience and insight into human behavior. And then two, in terms of solutions, you need to surround yourself with what we call a full spectrum of perspectives. And that's where diversity comes into. So we see diversity as a full spectrum of perspectives. So these are the two things, the two minimum requirements that leaders are required in our circle to do their job effectively, which is to protect and serve the team. And the protection part is obviously the most difficult part because sometimes there's team members that exhibit harmful behaviors. And when we step in to correct those behaviors, and I love your term call up, because that's exactly what we do. When we see somebody where they finish a task and we see them going right to their phone instead of looking to the left and to the right and seeing if those people need help, we step in to correct that behavior. If that behavior isn't corrected, it doesn't matter if they're a good person, they are
Right.
gone. And it is tough to make those decisions when the people are good people that you really like. But the team is always at the center. So the in terms of, you know, leadership, that protection part is very difficult. But when you said fight for the highest possible good, that really does combine the protect and serve mentality into one. You are literally fighting for the highest good. And while you're out there serving your team, you are also maintaining a protection mindset where you are looking for harmful behaviors and then stepping in to, and I've never heard the term call up, but I'm going to use it from now on because that was mind blowing for me.
Awesome.
It encapsulates exactly what you should be doing, which is giving people a chance to be better.
Yes.
And we all, like, man, there's times in my life where I've looked and I'm like, how was I so ignorant? Holy shit. And if I didn't have the chance to be a better person, I just would have remained in a completely ignorant state, and I would have never gotten to the state that I'm in, and I wouldn't have the camaraderie that I have with this team here. So I love that saying. I know this wasn't really a question or anything else, but I was just kind of adding to the conversation that this was awesome. It's really kind of taking the protect and serve mindset and encapsulated into one phrase. You're fighting for the highest possible good.
Yes. And it's the same concept that we're talking about, right? That fighting for the highest possible good, but also that calibrating high support and high challenge and knowing what is it that they need from me right now. Sometimes it's more challenge. Sometimes it's more support. You never go wrong when you bring support, but you can't overdo support because then you create entitlement, right? You have to calibrate, you have to bring that challenge. Like you described, you know, challenging that person, say, we need to redirect this behavior. But if we could provide that space for people, and someone provided it for us, right? When we think, gosh, why did I think that way? As I have become a student of myself, I realized, man, I was bringing some thoughts, some biases, some perceptions because of where I grew up, how I grew up, who I grew up around, that I've had to expose and shed. I need to leave this behind. This is a way of thinking that is not serving me or anyone else. Thank goodness that it didn't cost me, you know, a job or something like that, but someone provided a safe place, or there was a situation where someone taught me something different so I could let go of some old ways of thinking and introduce new. If we could do more of that, I think we would rescue, you know, some people from themselves and from, and keep them instead of dismissing or getting rid of them. Now, there are those resistant people. We talk about resistant versus responsive. Always hire responsive people. You can always redirect them. Resistant people, there's pride, there's arrogance, there is, you know, self-deception. It's not me, it's them. I can do without those folks. Unfortunately, I have to do without those folks because it's too hard to work with a resistant person, but we can change the world with a responsive person who's willing to learn something different and redirect themselves.
And Maria, Jim asked a really good question around the idea. It seems we spend a lot of time focused on the individuals we're trying to bring along, yet we have literally spent centuries minimizing entire races in our country and within our businesses. And by not being an inclusive or not having an inclusive mindset, or by not being inclusive by nature, how do you balance that? How do you balance kind of like the individual approach of bringing along and the totality of really what we're experiencing in reality? And I'd love to get some of your thoughts on that.
Boy, that is a hard question, because of course when we equip the individual, they're able to make a change for themselves and be able to impact. There has to be level of control. I can't control the whole industry, right? But I can impact individuals who will then collectively be making changes that will begin to shift the way we view things. And so that's a tough question, because it is a long-term game we're in here. This is not a short-term situation. I mean, I spent 20 years in the industry, and I've been doing this for 7 years as a consultant, and I expect to be doing this well. I don't expect to retire. I just think there's too much work to be done. I'm just going to do different things, but construction will always be, the place where I will focus my energy, because it's the industry I love and I know, and I want to make an impact here and reach as many people as possible with this different way of thinking, so we can begin to shift from individuals to our industry, to hopefully, then we begin to impact where we begin to see people in a different way and impact different races. So it's a long-term journey that we're on.
Yeah, and Maria, just along that line, I don't know if you know who Brian Stevenson is. He's founded EJI and is probably one of the most profound civil rights leaders of our present day, and the impact that he's having and doing. And he's had a tremendous influence on me, but he talks a lot about truth telling and this idea that we've done a terrible job historically of truth telling. We've not really controlled the narratives of all this. So now we're reaping that, after centuries of really distorting truth, really, and kind of trying to accept lies as if they are truth, and yes. Many other countries who've had racial issues and had many of the same issues we've had have done much better. Everything from Germany to Rwanda to South Africa, they've embraced truth as part of the reconciliation process, which actually then is the precursor and the foundation for inclusion and allowing for diversity. And it just seems like that's a huge struggle for us. And I see it so it's kind of that whole idea is what's first, chicken or egg? Do we deal with the individuals and skirt truth, or do we hit truth head on and start doing it? Or is it a combination? But it's like, sometimes it feels like we're just skirting the truth and kind of trying to keep everybody happy. But all we're doing is just continuing the same old, kind of thing. So
that's a good point, Jim. And I think we have to be aware that we force something to happen too fast, and then it really never takes root in a healthy way to continue to grow. So it's, yes, what the truth, the truth telling, and then also giving space and time for some of these perspectives to begin to shift. A lot of the companies that I'm working with have folks that are, 5 to 10 years from retirement. And then we have this big gap. And then we have a lot of younger people that are maybe, in that 7 to 15 year experience. And so we've missed something here. So some of these old attitudes are retiring, quite literally, from work. And so if we have an opportunity to bring in some new thinking, let's be really intentional about what that looks like, so that we have a chance to shift the way we see ourselves as leaders and the way we see ourselves as an industry. Let's do that with great intention, and make sure that we are, we can look back and criticize. It is what it is. We are where we are. Let's look forward to figure out who do we want to be as an industry, and start there with the folks that are in that 7 to 15 year tenure, and say, how do we start building those folks? Not that the retiring folks have nothing to contribute, not at all. I work with some, amazing leaders who have tried, their best to build really strong, healthy organizations. We have an analogy. We say there are leaders in organization who add. They're like a plus. They bring value. And then there's leaders who subtract. They detract. There's negativity there. There's leaders who divide. They create silos. But the best, most amazing kind of leader is the X leader, the one who multiplies. And if we can teach you how to get healthy first, emotionally, physically, in your leadership, start multiplying. But don't multiply if you're not ready to go. If you are negative, we don't want your toxicity, multiply. But if you can get yourself clear on what it looks like to be a strong leader, you have a definition, an aspiring ideal of what that looks like. You know yourself. We want you to multiply your skills, your knowledge, and your expertise, because that's what we want inside the construction industry. People who are multiplying this kind of liberating leadership, not these old ways that have just slowed things down or are toxic or divisive. We need to be done with that kind of stuff. So what kind of leader are you, right? Where am I bringing value? Where am I multiplying? And ask, am I bringing negativity? Am I bringing division? Call yourself up. Call yourself up to do something different.
Best things leaders can learn to do is to identify the brilliant jerks amongst you and fire them.
I love the idea of multiplying liberating leadership.
Yes.
It's going to go on a t-shirt somewhere here soon.
Love it.
Hey, I just kind of want to chime in. I've been just listening and just trying to take it in. And I'm sure you guys all have at least heard sometimes when you're in these spaces, the only person of color, you don't feel obligated, but you should share. So thank you guys for not pressuring me, but at the same time, allowing me to share. It's just one of those things, right? It's crazy because I'm actually, I'm a technologist, and I happen to be a person of color in the construction industry. For me, a lot of the daylight that I'm seeing now is coming through a wave. I guess I'm lumped in all the new stuff, right? Tech is new, people of color, it's all new. But I think that I struggle too with, what's my role in all this? I grew up with a family of carpenters from the Caribbean, and I've been on job sites as long as I knew. Was formerly trained in civil engineering. Construction is like my thing. And you get to these companies, and you're often not seen, you're not represented. And to be frank, I worked with Turner in their New York office, which is pretty diverse, which is pretty cutting edge, which is probably one of the better environments. It wasn't until I went to like their national thing that I saw what the other regional chapters look like, and I heard the stories that, hey, your experience is not the norm. Mm. But I've seen, at least in New York, companies be really thoughtful around trying to create inclusive environments. Actually, just before I left, they started an affinity group called Building Voices, where they were actually cultivating communities. And I'm no longer at the company, but I still follow them on Instagram. I still interact with this affinity group because it became kind of like this space for Black builders and Black tinkerers, and it was something about a company that I'm no longer with, still providing space for people like me that made that really that's really helpful. So I wanted to add I think I'm grateful that you guys are taking up the work. I'm grateful that this is not just a group of people who feel marginalized, trying to figure out how to take down the system.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think that like anything else, I think it takes work. It takes all types of leaders saying, hey, what the future of the built industry and the built environment is going to look like. And I think we have to do our part. And I'm going to keep doing my part and helping our industry evolve. But I think it's very important that you guys continue to do your part.
Thank you, Khalid. That's awesome. I appreciate hearing your perspective.
And thank you for chiming in, for like dip my toe in, but no, that was awesome. Thank you, Khalid. Yeah. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.